Hello and welcome to the new YEV podcast. I'm going to get my words out there. So welcome to Chargeheads UK, and we're going to be talking about, are electric vans going to be the future? Do they work? And we're going to be talking about the positives and the negatives. My name's Tim Aylen, and joining me is Kevin Booker. And soon we'll have Alex Grant joining us. He's got a bit of COVID, so he's just late to the party, probably dosed himself up. But yeah, I'm really excited about talking about this because there's so much negativity around electric vans, and I want to understand what the actual truth is by having a good old discussion with my guys, Kevin, and soon to be Alex as well. So yeah, where shall we start this off, Kevin?
I think really it's like, there's some use cases where electric vans work so well, and you look at those ones, they're pretty much saturated. Your Royal Mail, your DPDs, your Amazon deliveries, because I know from experience doing the record that in those type of start-stop situations, you can get ludicrously high efficiencies out of a van because most of the time it's stopped. Whereas you'd find back in the day, back probably 10 years ago, you'd have all these delivery vans with their engines idling all the time, being really fuel inefficient, ruined in air quality. And now look at the improvements with, the post office. Again, apart from those odd rural routes, which are quite long distances, electric vans ideal for that. Your last mile delivery, I think that's pretty much sorted on the electric vans. But I think there are the use cases, your tradesmen that don't know where they're going one day to the next. There's situations where it can be a bit harder. And those who work from home with their van and don't have a driveway. So it can be quite expensive for them if they have to use public charging and not use a home driveway for charging.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We're going to discuss all of these things. But I thought if I start with exactly where my head's at with it, I think that there are plenty of use cases, especially with all the newer electric vans that have been coming out recently with better range, faster charging, better payloads, better towing capabilities. I've got a bit of skin in the game. I run Chargeheads. I'm in the EV industry. But what is really important to me is making sure that if a fleet or a business or a sole trader is going for electric van, that it will work. And I've seen certainly instances where people have rolled out electric vans and there's just been no planning involved. And there's, it's gone wrong, and the argument is, why are we going towards electric vans? Why are people buying them and some of the big fleets? It's this kind of focus and this this roadmap to decarbonisation. And I think sometimes there are occasions where it's just not being thought through. And that's where you hear about the negative experiences of electric vans. Plus the fact, I think quite a lot of the early ones weren't actually that great. I mean, yes, like you said, Kevin, in that use case where it's just short last mile deliveries, I think they did work really well. However, I mean, you think about the early vans that started. We've got the Nissan ENV 200. That's been out.
Kangoo.
Yeah, the Kangoo, and they've been out for 10 years now. So it must be something like that. It's a decent number of years. And yes, you could argue the Nissan ENV 200, it did have a little bit of cooling on the batteries, so the degradation wasn't as bad. And I know quite a few people have turned them into electric camper vans when they bought them cheap. And there are still councils and businesses still running them. I can think of Nottingham City Council. They run quite a few ENV 200 vans, and they use them vehicle to grid. So once they've been used on a duty cycle, on a day, on a run, they plug back in, and the batteries can help balance the grid and feed back electric back into the grid, and they can make money from that. So there's some great possibilities and there's some great use cases. But I think what we really need to talk about is the challenges, which we can go through. And I really want people to chip in with their positive and negative experiences of electric vans. So light up the comments, whack in your experience in there, and we can discuss them. We can talk about them to see, okay, was an electric van right in that purpose, in that particular use case? Or maybe it's a question of waiting until there is a more suitable van that will be fit for purpose, whether that's to do with range, charging speed, or any of the other things that we're going to be talking about today. So So yeah, Kevin, I mean, if we start with, I suppose
Well,
sorry, go on, mate.
I think first of all, we should probably, with current electric vans, address the elephant in the room, that there's actually in reality not much choice, because you think that basically most of the electric vans currently on the market are pretty much the same van. So you look at, you know, the Peugeot Partner, the Citroen Berlingo, the Toyota Pro-A City, the Fiat Scudo, not a Scudo, it's the Fiat Doblo. They're all the same van.
Apparently no one's buying EV vans. Stop lying. You literally just lie for 5 minutes. It's untrue, because I see DPD turning up with electric vans. When I'm on the road, I see a lot of electric vans. So I appreciate your comment, Shane, but I'm not lying. I've seen them with my own eyes. And like I said, I do have DPD electric van drops quite a lot of the time. But, you know, keep the negative ones coming, because I'm more than happy to talk through my experiences and, you know, try and keep it factual for sure.
I took delivery of 2 last week, so I think they definitely turned up. So,
and, what vans did you go for, Kev?
So this is the weird one. They were actually the ID Buzz cargos.
Oh yeah,
and
okay.
Weirdly, I find that actually it's much cleverer as a van than a car, because really it's gone the reverse. So it's actually, the Buzz Cargo is a car-derived van that's been made out of a car platform, whereas normally it's like, you look at things like the E-Rifters and the E-Travelers and stuff. They're cars that have been made out of vans. So
Yeah.
it's you know, and it's quite clever. It's got little cubby hole for the cable under the floor and stuff. And it is actually, the one disadvantage with it is it's not got the weight that of it. So it's only 750 kilos payload, which is the smaller van size.
Yeah, it's pretty poor. Yeah. It's pretty poor from a payload point of view. So yeah, I mean,
but it can tow at 1.2 to 1,200 kilos. Problem is it's 280 brake horsepower, so it's a bit too fast for a van. But
there we go. Well, Casey's just mentioned OpenReach. Yeah, they've got a big drive on electric vehicles and decarbonisation. DPD, of course. Yeah, I see them all the time. Royal Mail, yes. I mean, they're doing a lot around electric vans. British Gas, Octopus, Mighty. Yep, seen a few of those. AA. I've not only seen AA electric vans, I've also seen AA trucks as well, pickups.
Yeah, they've got their recovery truck is full electric now, and they've got a couple of those, the big flatbeds to recover your vehicle.
Yeah, RAC all have fleets that I've seen. No, thanks for chipping in, Kev. Locally, a couple of small businesses have them for last mile delivery. Funnily enough, there is a lady that washes dogs around here, and she's got an electric van. I've been meaning to do a video with her to find out her experiences, you know, real world experiences, because I appreciate that not everyone thinks that electric vehicles work for them. And I think Shane's got another comment to put in, who was negative earlier, which is fine. I negative, positive, that's what we want today. So Roland's mentioned more supermarket home shopping deliveries have gone electric. Yep, there's a massive drive. Tesco, Sainsbury's, I think Iceland have also started their kind of decarbonisation journey, which doesn't necessarily just mean electric. It also means hybrid vans and any like HVO, of course, for the diesel vans to reduce their CO2 if they're looking to reduce their CO2. So Shane's put British Gas are changing back to diesel vans. Fact. I'm sure that there is, Shane, I don't, you know, I would love to see the actual detail of that just to confirm what you're saying. Just saying fact at the end doesn't make it a fact, of course.
Yeah, I mean, I think with the British Gas one, I think, again, you doing the Dynamon stuff, they rolled them out without much thought. So they gave them to drivers who didn't have the ability to charge at home. So I think they're now refocusing on doing a more controlled thing to make sure that they're in the right places where people can charge them.
Yeah. Like you said, that goes back to what I said earlier, you know, not planning it, not maybe simulating, using historical data, simulating electric vehicles to see if they're going to work, understanding charging. Because as you know, Kev, and as I'm sure a lot of people know, charging is, you know, bearing in mind the ranges aren't great on these vehicles, especially with a payload in them. You know, charging needs to be thought about in a lot more detailed way. Whether that's charging at depot, charging publicly, which isn't ideal because that's going to create more downtime. It's very expensive. And not all their drivers are necessarily going to have a driveway to charge at home, which is the ideal way of charging a van, you know, to start a delivery or start a day. LMA PWNE, seems like all Amazon vans are electric in the US now. Other parcel services seem to be wrapping up as well. That's good to hear. Thanks for across the water, mate. Shane, you say the early vans are not as good as the new ones now. So what about the resources used to make the older EV vans that no one wants? What will become of them? Well, we discuss this a lot of the time, Shane. So EV batteries can be recycled. People use them in EV conversions, like I am in my TVR. And it looks like Alex is joining us. Good stuff. So they can be recycled. And I know that there's a lot of manufacturers that are focusing on using used batteries to drop the carbon intensity on the production of these vehicles. So yeah, I mean, quite a lot of those older vans, they're still going. It's just like the older EVs, you know, Nissan Leafs, you still got 2011, 2012, 2013 cars. They're over 10 years old and they're still being utilized. Yes, okay, Leaf, bad battery degradation. They've probably only got 30 to 50 miles on, but for a second car, just taking it to the shops, that is okay for a lot of people. And for $2,000, which those the lower range vehicles EVs seem to be, you know, it's fit for purpose. And this is what it's all about, in my opinion, is making sure that, okay, if you're going to go electric, make sure you plan and make sure that the vehicle is going to be fit for purpose. Good, Shane, keep them coming, mate. Not a problem. Wayne, hello, Wayne. How we doing? Been using the E-Expert 75 kilowatt hour and a Maxis E-Delivery 72 kilowatt hours for 2 years for our solar business. We mostly work within the range of the vans, 150 miles. That's good.
I have a question for Wayne on that then. Would you go back to diesel? Because you're a use case. You've had them for 2 years. Are they working for you? You know, in the interest of balance, would you go back to diesel, or would your next vans be electric vans?
And what sort of cost differences? And please make sure you take into consideration the infrastructure that you put in, whether it's a home charger, because that's not often talked about. You know, yes, there's a lot of evangelists out there. Yes, there's a lot of diehard diesel/petrol heads out there. We're talking about middle ground here. We're talking about focusing on actually the reality and the real TCO, the real costs. Stephen, nice for chipping in. Good weekend, Shane. I'm not sure if you're a mate of Shane or not. Doesn't matter. Hey, I wanted negative and positive comments in this podcast today, because what's the point of just having positive? It's just an echo chamber, waste of time. Alex, how you feeling, mate? Snotty.
Rough. So a little bit this evening. But yeah,
no
I'm getting over the dregs of some flu that's knocked me sideways for days. And I appear to have crap all over my camera. So,
we'll need some assistance in your key areas in a minute. Zev Mandate Day is the one that I think I'll need your assistance on. So Kev's just put in, the only stupid setup I've seen was a Royal Mail depot, bank of chargers at the depot, perfect. However, they've decided to make them RFID enabled with one RFID in the office. So basically, if people don't know what an RFID is, you're talking about a card to tap to make it work. There's only one card. I mean, yeah, that's not ideal. So yeah, the operational side of charging these vans is just as important as putting the infrastructure in and putting the right van in, of course. So yeah, that's a great round of comments so far, people. Again, like I said, positive or negative, I want to hear them all. I'm sure Kevin, Alex does as well. Shane, good man. You've got some more comments. I like your attitude. Most EV people just call you names just because you don't agree with EV stuff. Well, you come to the right place, mate, because we don't do that. So yeah, talking about the UK van market. So it has had a slow start. So I've got some figures here. In 2023, there were 20,253 BEV, battery electric vehicle registrations, and that's a market share of 5.9%, pretty low, right? And the top sellers were the Ford E-Transit, Vauxhall Vivaro E, and the Mercedes E-Sprinter. Now, I'm pretty sure that all of those vans, maybe not the Vauxhall, have recently been upgraded to have longer range and better charging. Certainly the Mercedes E-Sprinter, which we'll talk about in a minute. 2024 van sales was 12,500. The market share was 6.5. So obviously it was the total van market was obviously smaller based on those figures. And then 2025 so far, this is the positive thing from a registration point of view. There has been growth. So they're now on track to hit over what they did last year. But let's just put this into a bit of context. So there's obviously a big focus on decarbonisation for companies to hit their ESG targets, decarbonisation targets. Like it or love it or hate it, rather, it's happening, and there's big investment going in. So you will see more electric vans on the road. Yeah, have you got any guys? Have you got anything to comment on the progress the last few years of the van market?
I think there's one thing which we have spoken about on the podcast a few times, is the thing that's not helping small businesses jump to electric vans is the road tax change. The fact that now it used to be a free road tax on an electric van, and now it's, Alex can remind me the price, I'm sure it's over 300 now for the yearly tax on an electric van. It's no different.
345, I think it is. Yeah, 345, I think it is.
Yeah, that is. I mean,
the interesting thing as well is.
Go on. Sorry.
There's a delay, isn't there, on this?
Yeah, it's like that.
I'm just wondering if I'm. Yeah, I mean, yeah. There are some inconsistencies as well, which is an issue. Larger 3 to 4 ton vans, those have all sorts of areas where they're counted towards the ZEV mandate. They're over 3.5 tons. Those vans are LCVs, but they are registered, and from a road tax perspective, VD road tax perspective.
We keep losing you, mate. I'm gonna mute you for a second, mate. If you want to try and sort out your tech for a minute, mate, because yeah, I'm not sure people are hearing you properly. Wayne's just chipped in. Absolutely would not go back to diesel. I've been training them in for new models. Using the Tesla superchargers allows us to cover most of Scotland if we need to. That's good to hear that the Tesla superchargers accept vans. And I know a lot of van drivers do take advantage of the third less cost for charging on those and faster charging. You say they are updating the range on them. Surely that means less payload due to heavy batteries. A van is up to 3.5 ton. You know, you're absolutely right, Shane, because normally having a bigger battery does reduce the payload. And I've certainly seen that on the new Isuzu truck. That's got a great payload and it's got a really strong towing capability, but they've had to go for a smaller battery, so the range isn't as good. However, like we said at the beginning, certain use cases, that'll be fine. Not for people that have got emergencies the other side of the country. That ain't obviously going to work, you know, so that would not be fit for purpose.
The other thing as well is what's important is technology has moved on. So some of those batteries are getting more capacity and they're lighter than the previous ones. Because I know even just, for example, I had the EV6 car last week, which has a bigger battery, which is now 1 kilo lighter. So stuff is changing around that. And battery technology is, you're getting more energy density in the same weight, which is an advantage now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And as time goes on, with the amount of investment that certainly China are putting in batteries, are the big hitter when it comes to that tech. They're making leaps and bounds in that. So it'd be interesting to see how that develops moving forward, especially on the van side. And obviously HGV, which we're going to be talking about next week before I go away on holiday. That's the problem. Bigger batteries, less payload. No, you're absolutely right. As it stands with current battery technology. There is a 4.25 ton limit for both EV and hydrogen because of the increase in batteries. Yeah, there is a hydrogen, I think it's a Stellantis van, but I don't think realistically that's going to work unless you happen to have your own hydrogen filling station at your depot, which is quite highly unlikely, but not impossible. Now changed the rules so you don't have to do this training. That is basically non-existent when I've looked into it.
The scary thing with that is that was announced and then implemented about 18 months apart. So we don't actually know how many fleets moved over to using those vans, assuming you didn't need the training requirement, because it was announced under Rishi Sunak, but it's only been implemented recently under Labour that you don't have to have that training. So I wonder how many fleets put people in those cars still requiring training. You know, and they assumed that this had been passed when actually it's only recently been put through. But the point I was making before the technology kind of caught up with me is the 3.5 to 4.25 ton thing is a big issue as well. One of the issues that tends to hurt van adoption is not necessarily, it's a combination of things, right? The vans being more expensive, limited range, limited payload and stuff. They can work really well in certain areas where the GT cycles suit them. But at the larger end of the market, you've got this added complexity where they're a grey area. So the 3.5 to 4.25 ton vans are actually still HGVs, but they have a derogation that allows you to use them under certain conditions. Now, that doesn't exclude them from all HGV requirements. So even though you don't have to have training to use them, they have to have an MOT after 12 months from new instead of 36 months like an LCV would. So if you've got an identical diesel and electric version of the same van, so a large van, if it's a 3.5 ton EV, over 3.5 tons and it's an EV, you still have to do HGV MOTs, and obviously you have to also go to an HGV capable MOT tester to do so, which can also introduce some delays in doing that. You also have to follow under certain circumstances if you're really going, pushing the range of those vehicles, you have the issue then with driver's hours rules. You have to obey different speed limits to LCVs. You also have issues where most charging points are designed around cars. So you have height restrictions. You have bays that are not really designed for long wheelbase, high roof vans. There's also the big vans are a really, really challenging thing. They can work really well in certain circumstances. I mean, all the Amazon vans around here are electric, although what payload they're rated at, I'm not entirely sure. And they're big electric transit vans, but the government could work a little harder to try and alleviate some of those issues. And then the question that comes with that is this: you can't overcome physics, right? If their safety rules are in place for 3.5 ton plus vans, they're in place for a reason. And the fact that you're in an electric van doesn't overcome the fact that that's still a heavy van that ordinarily would require training. And so it's either an issue or it's not an issue, right? So you either kind of, you're still putting drivers in a heavy van. Just because it's electric doesn't mean it's going to stop any quicker or have any fewer issues in terms of the added mass that you would have in a diesel van. I don't know how well I'm explaining this in terms of, because my head's a little bit foggy, but it's an odd message to send to fleets that it's like, well, okay, just because it's electric, surely it's still potentially a bit of a safety issue if you're putting in an untrained driver in what is effectively and still classed as an HGV. But yeah, they're a real fuzzy area. I mean, the van tax thing, obviously, those vans are still taxed from VED perspective as an HGV, and they're still treated from an MOT perspective and certain things as an HGV. They're still registered as an HGV. It's just that they've put certain things in place to try and soften it, and they haven't quite leveled the playing field yet. So if you're driving a big fleet of vans, you've got all of the cost and the range issues and the charging issues to cope with, on top of then the fact that you've got infrastructure that's not really designed for those kind of vans, and you've got additional administrative headaches that are going to go, oh, do you know what, actually this is still starting to sound like quite hard work. So yeah, I think it's a challenging one.
You're absolutely right. It is hard work. It's not only hard work, it's complicated. It's not just a fact of buy a diesel vehicle and just go to the petrol station, fill it up. You got to think about the charging infrastructure. You got to think of, have I got enough, if it's depot charging infrastructure, have I got enough power at the depot to be able to charge all my vehicles if they're all charging at the same time and they all need X amount of energy? You then got to think, how many chargers do I need? What power do they need to be? Your electric tariff, can you take advantage of charging overnight?
You've got demand charges and all sorts of other bits that you've got to cope with as well, haven't you, as a business? They can be huge.
And which routes do I electrify first? There's so much in here, and that's what I do in my 9 to 5. It's all about using that data to simulate electric vehicles, using the historic data to find these insights out. It's really interesting, Shane, that you're a HGV driver, so I'm glad you'll be there next week. Because I'm sure I'll learn some stuff from you and you'll learn some stuff from us. So that's what it's all about. So yeah, I mean, what I thought I'd also highlight were the longest range electric vans at the moment, because people might not know what the electric van ranges are out there. So the top 3 at the moment is the Mercedes-Benz e-Sprinter 111 kilowatt hour, 113 kilowatt hour battery, which is 273 miles. Apparently that is more than achievable. Some people have got 290. I'm sure when it comes to winter, they've got a payload and they're on the motorway, it's probably going to be looking more like 200. So it'd be interesting to, if anyone's got any experience of those vans on the chat or later, whack it in the comments, be really interested. Ford E Transit Custom at 236 miles, and the Maxis eDeliver 7. That's one of Maxis's new vehicles. Maxis is a Chinese brand. It's owned by SIAC, who also do MGs. They've got a 230-mile range vehicle. And in terms of best vehicles for payload, in terms of a small, compact, efficient van, you've got the Maxis eDelivery 3, which is quite an old van now. That's got a 1,200 kilogram payload. You've got the 4D Transit, that's got a 1,758 kilogram payload, and the Vauxhall Vivaro E, which has got a 1,226 kilogram payload. So not huge payloads, but you know, this is still early days when it comes to you know, vans electric. So diesels will still always win from a payload and pulling and range point of view at the moment. However, not everybody needs that. So this is where people can take advantage of, if they can find a vehicle that's fit for purpose and the costs work, and finding the right power, charging at home or charging at the depot, all these complicated things, then there is opportunities for people to take advantage of them.
Because this is, I think, where last mile delivery works quite well with them, because generally with those type of vans, you max out before you gross out. So you run out of space in them before you're anywhere near their actual weight, because that sort of stuff, your home deliveries, is generally quite bulky, especially, well, I've seen like quite small things come in quite large boxes from certain online retailers. So you run out of space well before the weight, because you carry mainly air.
The interesting thing with that sort of last mile delivery stuff is the early vans cause headaches as well. I mean, I know from when I've done work in the kind of the e-commerce, you know, talking to e-commerce companies, when they said their first wave of vans was mostly like ENV 200s and Kangoos and things like that. Mostly ENV 200s, I think, because they could rapid charge. And they said the problem was the ENV 200 is quite a small van. So they were saying that they were having to run more vehicles. Even though they were electric, they were running a larger fleet. And therefore you end up with, when you're sat in traffic, you're seeing more liveried vans with X or Y delivery company written down the side, and you're thinking, God, this city is absolutely chock-a-block with vans from this company. But since they've had that, you know, since these companies have had access to larger vans, you know, the likes of the E-Transit's been a big game, you know, a real game changer in terms of in terms of that, having that space on board. Although Stellantis now with their large vans are doing the same. That's then kind of overcome that problem. So it's a step-by-step process, isn't it? Sort of trying to iron those things out.
No,
but
absolutely.
What you said about operating costs is quite interesting. I mean, I have a slightly different view, I know, to you too, in terms of how hydrogen and other kind of things might play a role. I mean, one of the things that's quite common with van fleets is that they're based on, especially if they're back to base van fleets, is they tend to be based on industrial parks. The one that always comes to mind is the massive DPD one down the side of the massive DPD park on the M4 near Bristol. I think there's a Sainsbury's distribution centre down there as well. Once you start getting a couple of HGV fleets and a large van fleet of that size, you then have quite a good steady business case with known duty cycles and kind of not the unpredictability you'd have trying to provide that infrastructure for cars where the usage will vary through the week. You've got a daily throughput of vans and HGVs using an electrolyzer. You've suddenly got a business case of putting a shared station in. Yeah. And as difficult as that can be and costly as that can be, there are, as you'll know, there's all sorts of issues in terms of grid connections and putting, you know, in space for infrastructure that for charging EVs. So, and obviously all the technology can be shared. So the Stellantis vans, for example, and the Renault, they've got the joint venture with the company in France. They're basically taking electric vans, reducing the size of the battery, and having basically a plug-in hybrid hydrogen van.
You talking about Flexis?
Not Flexis, no. What are they called? They begin with an H. The Renault have got a joint venture. They do master conversions.
Okay.
But for things like that, where you kind of have, where you have, you know, maybe the step in the short term is you have a range extender, petrol or diesel range extender for your kind of your longer haul stuff that then enables it to have quite a long urban range, but then with the ability to go further without compromising the payload too much, or that you have things like hydrogen in the meantime. But I think once you have the cost case right for whatever it is, businesses will jump on it, won't they?
And talking about the costs, so you're absolutely right. It's that initial cost, you know, the upfront cost of, yes, the electric vans do cost more. Then you've got the infrastructure. Then you've got the possible extra cost for grid upgrades. If you can't get the grid upgrade and you're hell bent on electrification and decarbonisation, then you need to think about battery storage. Yes, there's a lot of upfront costs which can be mitigated in certain ways. So, like you said, shared charging. But with the challenges that come with that is then, having a system that allows you to be bookable. Are they all just charging overnight? Okay, great. That's the local area. Then when they're all out, these spaces, they're not being utilized. So there's companies out there like Power and other companies similar to them that Right Charge, etc., that have these systems and have these opportunities to put your charging infrastructure on their app, what have you, and to be able to share the charging out and to build revenue from. And the fact, if you've got battery storage, you can make money selling energy back to the grid when you don't need it. So there are some positives that come in, but yes, that initial outlay is a lot more. And the TCO and the use case, you have to run the electric vans, generally speaking, a lot longer for it to make sense financially at the moment. Yeah, and
I think as well, you've got to kind of look at clever solutions. I was talking to someone from kind of one of the local authorities around here, and he's got a big fleet of electric vans, and he's gone to the level similar to what you do. They've all got RFID tags, and he knows how much power they're likely to use in a day, and the chargers will tailor the power output so that everything's charged overnight, because it'll say, well, that vehicle only is going to need a charge rate of 2 kilowatts, and it'll be full in the morning, and just all the programming from that. So that's, there's quite clever things out there.
What systems are used for that? Do you know?
I think that was a Swarco system.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, there are some very clever load balancing, dynamic charging, and back office systems that allow you to do that. When I used to work for a company for charged infrastructure, Kempower have Chargeheads, which does something very similar, and I think a lot of the other back offices, they do that. So Kevin's just chipped in. Thank God I don't sell LCVs. Max payload on transit customers, 1,450 kilograms. So 1,200 kilograms isn't too far off, but needs some but for some that plus 200 kilograms will be required. Mod Scotsman, that's why we have the Charge Cube idea for battery storage and charging. Yes, so the Charge Cube is a Felton-made battery storage system made of second life batteries. Shane, you're asking about what happens to all the old vehicles when they're null and void. These sort of batteries, so Kangoo batteries from vans, they've gone into connected energy battery storage. Batteries from buses and HGVs are going into battery storage with companies like Zenobē and Charge Cube. They utilize Tesla charging packs. Mod Scotsman, the Papilio 3 from 3TI as well. Yes, the Papilio 3 as well. Solar and charging deployed within 24 hours and a regular 3-phase connection. They also have battery storage on them as well. And also some V2G. So yeah, Kev, thanks for chipping in there. So yeah, so I'm just going to grab a drink. Hang on. Talking too much. So yeah, when we're talking about costs, I think that is one of the main things, and something that I've been talking about recently are the 3 Ps have been the biggest challenges. So price, of course, power, and payload, and I think all of those have already been covered on this session. Infrastructure and charging. Kevin, you've got a pretty good knowledge on that with what you do. How have you found it? What's your experience so far in charging fleets?
I think the problem is we've got what a lot of people have said is, well, people should just move their depots. And I think it's a naive thing, because like some companies aren't going to move their depots. So if you haven't got enough grid capacity, you shouldn't just assume that. So there do need to be solutions, with load management and grid improvements. Wales is particularly tricky for grid because there's not much connectivity for grid in the middle. So, you can't expect a company that's in, say, Pembroke Dock to say, well, you can move your depot, because Pembroke Dock has a lot of power consumption already, which is the problem, because you've got the big refineries and stuff. So when you look at a lot of people comment, when you look at Wales, we're quite carbon intensive. And it's not because we haven't got green energy, it's because we've got some quite high energy consumers. There's the refinery. Soon there's going to be the steelworks with an arc furnace, which I have no idea how much energy an arc electric arc furnace takes, I would imagine it takes a fair amount. But there's that, and I think it's people are doing clever solutions. You know, like the person I talked to from a local authority, the Merthyr local authority, but they've got loads of electric vehicles. They only get electric vans and stuff. Do you think when you look at a council area like that, that can work quite well because they're not a big local authority? But then you scale it up to somewhere like Powys, which is in the middle of Wales, and they've got a massive area to cover, and again, not much charging infrastructure. So it's, you know, it's a case of building it. But the other thing is there's certain areas where there, you know, the grid will cope overall with electric vehicles, but there are areas of the grid that aren't going to cope unless they're massively upgraded because there's no interconnects there. You know, Scotland, I read somewhere that Scotland soon won't be able to put any more renewable on because they can't get rid of it. As in, they haven't got enough interconnects to get that electricity out to other parts of the UK.
Aren't they doing a massive cable? I say cable, a massive connection from Scotland to, I want to say East Anglia. I want to say that sort of area to help with power. I'm sure I heard that in a recent talk. I don't know if you guys have heard about that.
Yeah, I saw a presentation from one of the renewable, I think it was Renewables UK, and that was showing that there are these things scheduled, but they all, unfortunately, some of the systems around these things being deployed can slow it down. Unfortunately, no one likes a pylon. And the problem with no one liking a pylon, if you underground everything, it's a magnitude of 10 times more expensive to bury the cable than to put it across. And it's one of those things, yes, they do spoil the view, but, you know, a lot of people say we're pretty much in a climate emergency where actually there's going to be far worse spoiling the view than maybe a pylon. So I think, you know, I think the legislation needs to catch up with that to allow people to allow the grid to expand, because you can have, I think I drove to North Wales and there's loads of signs saying no pylons here, but that's going to stop heat pumps, it's going to stop electric vehicles, and it will stifle the 2030 targets. So I mean, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer, but
I think battery storage is definitely the answer in a lot of cases. It seems to be a quick, you know, modular, quickly deployable solution. Obviously, battery prices have come right down. The second life batteries, there's loads out there now. I mean, Felton's Charge Cube, off the top of my head, it's sort of 70, 80 grand for, I want to say 240 kilowatt hours. Someone tell me if I'm wrong. And while I'm asking people, if anyone's on here with experience with electric vans, positive or negative, I've only had Shane give me negative so far, which is absolutely fine. Whack them in the comments, because that's what this chat is all about, finding out the real detail, the real experiences out there, and just seeing if we can solve some. I'm not sure we can solve many. So go on. What are you saying?
I think what it comes down to is something that you've touched on now. Is I think we need to not necessarily just look at the grid upgrades. We need to look at more localism. You know, you look at all the industrial estates with those roofs. You think they could all be solar, battery storage, and they're actually where those depots are. You know, I think rather than just looking at the grid, there needs to be more community type energy where you've got power being used where it's needed. I mean, it's a good, I think it's, have you heard of AW Energy?
Yeah.
They've got a wind turbine next to a charging station. They've got battery storage going in. There's a Starbucks there, and they're one of the cheapest charging rates in the UK because it's about the localism. They're using the energy from that wind turbine to actually make it cheaper.
They put the charging infrastructure next to their wind power there, and that was from my previous company, funnily enough. So Chem Power chargers in there. It's supposed to be a pretty decent setup there. What's the cost per kilowatt hour there? Do you know, Kev?
I believe it's last time I was there, it was around about the 50 pence. It was one of the lowest I've seen.
It's because you don't visit Tesla chargers, Kevin, obviously. Sorry, had to get that in there. Someone was telling me actually the other day that, oh no, Believe chargers, they're cheaper now. They're only 40 something p. I was thinking that's funny because the one near me is like 56p. So there I was yesterday thinking, going past these Believe chargers, I thought I better go and have a look to believe it for myself. And they're still 56p. So obviously some people are taking advantage of cheaper charging with Believe, but Higham Ferrers isn't one of those places. Alex, you look like you're going to chip in there, mate.
No, just it's Yeah, just just listening in. Sorry.
Settling it nicely. Yeah, so yeah, I mean, there's lots of challenges. I mean, like I said, the cost, the power, the infrastructure, and the charging. So I think the biggest challenges, I think, at the moment, from what I've heard, the chats that I've been having with people, is, you know, if you've got depot charging and it's just last mile delivery, your DPDs, Royal Mails, that's I think a slightly easier use case, as long as you can get the power and you've got the money to do all the charging infrastructure. But where it's a bit more tricky is if they haven't got depots, or they might have a small depot, but they'd only, you know, the vans don't visit the depot. They're fitted out with all the equipment and they normally go home. This is a massive issue because not everybody has a driveway, and not everybody wants to put a charger or their own van, their work van, on the driveway either. So there's only a small percentage of the people that even have a driveway that have a van that are willing to actually have a charger at their house. So this is a massive issue, because if they're not charging at home at a much cheaper rate, saving the business money, not necessarily the driver, they're going to have to charge either at the depot, which isn't actually part of their duty cycle and route, or they've got to stop and charge at a public charger, which not only costs a lot more, you're talking, you know, anything from 56p AC charger to rapid, which is sort of 85p. And it's the downtime. I think, who was it? It was the guy that we had on the Gully product, Turbocharge. The guy from Turbocharge was telling us that it costs, you know, the savings made of having a charger at home very quickly pays for £1,000 worth of turbocharge. I can't remember the figures.
It's worth remembering as well, if you're a business and you're looking at rolling these out, and you do have a willing workforce who are prepared to do it, you can install a home charging point without it being classed as a workplace benefit. So there's no tax implications for the driver if you install a charging point at home, which is useful. I mean, it's not a massive step in the right direction, but it helps.
I mean,
so if you've got a driver with off-street parking, you can pay to put a charger in at their house, and they won't pay tax on it.
But then there's businesses that don't necessarily want to pay for people to have a charger at their house, especially if they've only just started. And it's a really, really muddy kind of subject, that one. But it gets even more muddy when you start talking about, you know, public charging for a van fleet. I think is full of negatives. It's not impossible, depending on the type of business and whether the driver's happy to take its lunch break or her lunch break in the vehicle while charging. It just seems to be that that I think is probably one of the biggest challenges, is the cost of charging and where to charge. So from a downtime point of view. So again, talking about using data, so using historic fleet data, simulating these vehicles and understanding where the dwell time is, so you're not changing the operation to stop to charge. So I think that's a big thing that will actually help the electrification and decarbonisation of these fleets. But it's not easy, right? None of this is easy, is it? Really?
No. I mean, and that's before we start even looking at blue light commercial fleets, which might have to go anywhere at any time. How do you model that? It's like such an unpredictable thing. So, you know, they're going to be the nightmare to actually electrify and stuff.
Well, I mean, you know, a lot of the blue lights, you know, the police forces, there's loads of work going on, and planning work and infrastructure work going on for blue light, and that have already been implemented. They're already running them. I've seen electric Skoda Enyaqs. The ambulance service seems to love them.
Saw an EV6 here the other week.
There we go. So yeah, I think there are a lot of them are doing it. But you're right, from an emergency point of view, and I know that Kevin did a fairly controversial post, you know, throwing the fishing line out there like he does, with regards to you know, if someone has an emergency and I don't have enough range, you know, what do I do? Therefore, an electric vehicle's not fit for purpose. And I think that the environmental services, who have got a electrification target, just like the Highways Agency, of 2027, which is that's a that's a tricky target, especially the type of vehicles they run. That they have vehicles that are on call, all the time, and they have to go from one side of the country to the other. And in those particular cases, it just doesn't work. And maybe a hybrid would work for that particular situation. It probably work 90% of the time, but there's going to be that 10% in an emergency where, stop to charge doesn't work, or not enough range, so you're going to have to stop there for half an hour to charge to get where you need to be. I'm sure Kevin might have a slightly different view on that.
Yeah, and I think it's those fringe cases where I think, which we've talked about before, is where the sustainable and e-fuels are for. There are those fringe cases where the e-fuels aren't for your daily stuff. They're for those fringe cases where there isn't an easy way to do it. You're environmentally, you're talking probably your national grids. Like, they've got some big stuff that actually has to go out to generate electricity in an emergency. So it's no good if you've got no electricity. But that's where I think people are mistaken. You see the posts saying e-fuels are the future. They're not. They're a fringe case for these things that aren't easy to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's more and more so. I think it's about getting the blend right. It's not a question of everything needs to be electric. That's just a load of rubbish, especially with what's out there from a commercial vehicle point of view. It's what blend to make sure that my operation runs smoothly and
as sustainably as possible. Yeah. It's
and
like, what's the goal? Is the goal to get everyone to go electric, or is the goal to get everyone to operate as sustainably as possible? And if the goal is to get everyone to operate as sustainably as possible, pushing them to operate non-operationally suitable vehicles is going to mean that they just keep what they already have, regardless of age, safety, environmental performance. You have to give people the option, don't you?
No, absolutely. I'm sorry I missed out on the comments here. My dad's put Renault Kangoo van E-Tech. It's probably from a comment earlier. Hi, Matt. Thanks for joining in, Matthew Lewis. The small arc furnaces I worked on were 250 volt, 3-phase, and 13,000 amps. It's quite a lot of power, that.
How much is a big one then, if that's a small one?
Yeah. Mod Scotsman, the DPD vans in Bristol use all the chargers up in the Bath and Bristol Science Park. Surprised the Fully Charged show haven't mentioned it, as their office is based there. Well, actually, let's go back to charging for a second, because again, I've heard quite a lot of use cases where if they are using the public charging infrastructure for charging their van fleet, yes, there's the downtime, yes, there's the extra cost, is actually they're having trouble actually finding a DC rapid charger that's free. Because more and more, especially in the city in London, because more and more so, there's Uber drivers, there's other people that are utilising these chargers, and yes, on the motorway services, there's some amazing charging infrastructure, as highlighted by, and I pretty much mention them every week. I'm going to get collared for this soon. Johnny Smith has just recently bought a Tesla Model S 90 P90D for $5,500, something silly cheap, needed a bit of work doing to it, and he highlighted only the other day that there's 2 grid serve chargers over there, which were there 5 years ago. Now look at what's here. It's another 15 grid serve chargers and 20 odd Tesla chargers. So there is some really strong infrastructure, DC charging infrastructure in certain areas. But you think about London, I mean, they've got a hell of a lot of work to do there because of the electrification focus. The number of vans.
If you look at London, they've got a moratorium on data centers because there's just not enough power going into there. So there's no new data centers allowed in London. So you think that so if a data center is not allowed, it's going to be at some point where they're probably going to hit the point where they need to do upgrades to get charging infrastructure in.
Yeah, I think if anyone's getting into any industry, into the EV world at the moment, batteries has got to be a safe bet, because you just think that there's so much opportunity there. Not hydrogen. Sorry, Alex.
What about, if we're talking about vans, I mean, the word van tends to get used interchangeably with LCV, but if you talk about LCVs, you have to talk about pickup trucks. What do you do with pickup trucks?
Yeah,
those are vehicles that require, range. They require power. They require all the things that are quite difficult to offer with an electric vehicle, and not power so much, but pulling, like towing power, as in capacity. I meant performance rather than power. But yeah, they need to offer a load of things that are quite difficult to offer without putting a very heavy battery and having an enormously heavy vehicle. It works in the States where you've got things like the F-150, but I mean that's got to be the best part of. It's got to be 3+ tons, surely, that vehicle.
Yeah, it wouldn't be legal on our roads to use it.
No.
It would be a truck, as in a proper truck, not a two. It would be a HGV, even though it doesn't look like one.
So what do you do with those? And the interesting thing with that as well is I think we're going to start to see, I mean, now that there's been the change where the double cab pickups are being taxed, like, sorry, my daughter's just coming, where they're starting to tax them like cars for certain aspects. I think you'll start to see that there'll be more of the plug-in hybrid side of the pickup truck market's going to take off, and that's going to be quite interesting because as that volume comes in, as I briefly mentioned last week, the ZEV mandate targets are a little bit flexible in that if you beat your CO2 target for your non-ZEVs, you can count that towards you can count those as extra zero emission vehicles. So from the point of view of, if you're Ford, and I mean, Ford shares technology now with Volkswagen, so will we see a plug-in hybrid Amarok come along? Those are going to be great ways to kind of achieve, sales targets, ZEV mandates targets over the next few years as you start to get these vehicles in that are going to be way, way under your LCV CO2 targets. They're going to be really useful for kind of topping up on that. And the credits are transferable as well, which is interesting. So
it's interesting you say that. Did you hear the announcement from Ford? I think it was actually last week.
No, you might.
So Ford are dropping the 2-litre twin turbo diesel Ford Ranger. It'll only be plug-in hybrid, and there's the big
the V6,
the V6
3.2.
So literally you will only have, for the smaller pickup trucks, it'll be the plug-in hybrid on the smaller one, and then that. So they've already said that they're dropping the 2-litre twin turbo diesel, which was the workhorse that most companies used. Not many went for the V6 3.2-litre V6.
But it'd be good for Ford if they're selling lots of, if they can sell a lot of plug-in hybrid. I mean, if they can, Ford obviously got a lot of good electric vans as well. But if they can sell a lot of plug-in hybrid pickup trucks and corner that market, which they stand to do because they're ahead of everyone pretty much on that, they're going to do very well in terms of achieving ZEV mandate targets, aren't they? So
well, the two trucks on the market at the moment, yes, there was the Maxus T90. But that
was 2-wheel drive only and a very limited towing range, didn't it?
True, but the 4-wheel drive one I think is coming out very, very soon. Then the Isuzu is going to be out this time next year. That's a 63 kilowatt-hour battery, 3.5 ton towing weight. That's pretty impressive. Then the Maxus, they've got this e-Terron 9. Now the load capacity is really poor. I mean, it's something like 500-600 kilograms. However, it's a double cab. Apparently, I was talking to someone who works at Maxus. They're getting a lot of interest in it because it can be used in so many different use cases, especially for like councils and things like that. It's an amazing truck. It's not set up as a truck. It's more kind of on a different tax level, more like a car than a van, really. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. I've been dying to get into one of those, to have a drive of one, and get my next door neighbour who drives a Ford Ranger truck, just to see what he thinks and just have a play around with it. So John, sorry mate, I've only just seen your comment. Companies don't encourage the cheap DC chargers either. They need no downtime, so they go to the nearest Shell recharge. They count the cost of the most expensive, and at the 90p more than diesel.
Yeah, significantly so, yeah.
Yeah, I can believe that. I mean, our Shell charger up the road, I've not used it yet, but I think it was out of commission. But they put it in, it was out of commission for about a year and a half. But I think BP have pulled out quite a lot of the EV world market, BP Pulse, etc. But Shell does seem to be in there. So that'd be interesting to see what Shell do in the coming months, etc.
So you've got a lot of new companies, like BEV, that they've popped up everywhere. They did. I hadn't seen them at all in Wales, and now there's like loads going everywhere. So there's some companies being quite aggressive with putting infrastructure in.
Apparently, there's a mild hybrid van as well as the full plug-in hybrid Ford Transit custom, Mercedes-Benz Vito mild hybrid, apparently. So I wonder if any of the other manufacturers follow suit. We've obviously got the ZEV mandate of 16% this year. Is that right, Alex?
Yeah, that's right.
Are we on track to hit that this year? I say we.
No, it's about 8% so far this year. But it's worth remembering, because one of the mistakes that people make is that they look at, if you're looking at SMMT figures, if you're nerdy enough to go and actually track the data down, I have seen people make the mistake of looking at the when you've got the chart, you have to add together two rows from it, because it lists EVs up to 3.5 tons, and then it lists EVs over 3.5 tons, and they're both counted towards the LCV target, even though obviously the bigger ones are technically HGVs. Okay. So when you see some people will report a lower figure, like I think it was something like 5.6, 5.7% last year without the larger vans, but it's 6.3 with the larger vans. But I mean, that was against a figure of like a target of 10%. This year we're at 8.3 or something like that. It's about 50% up in the first 6 months of the year, but we're still way off 16%.
And like you mentioned before, they can trade carbon credits, but
yes,
ultimately it's 15 grand per ICE van sold excess.
Yeah, although the fines, the fines were only reduced, weren't they, last year? There was the first year of the ZEV mandate, there was a reduced fines on vans. Yeah. Because they recognise it's a challenge, basically.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, it's like I said, it's complicated. There's lots of challenges out there, as many will know, or if you don't, I work for Dynamon. They use data to simulate electric vehicles against this historic fleet data. So they take the historic fleet data and they simulate electric vehicles on top of that to understand the feasibility, create energy models to understand the charging infrastructure and the timings for charging, and TCO. And basically, it's an end-to-end tool to help understand all of this. So planning, and I think there has been a lot of bad planning in the past, which I think has really kind of put a lot of negative stories out there, which hasn't helped. So yeah, it'd be really interesting to see what happens in the near future. And I think it's a big subject, so I'm sure we'll touch on it again soon. If someone wants to know about the Dynamon Dynamon software tool that we use, there is a video on my YouTube channel. I'm going to update it soon because there's loads of new features that have happened to it as well. But we're getting close to that time, guys. So yeah,
just
what
on,
go on,
just on Casey's comment and stuff. There was comparing the Terron 9 to the Ranger Raptor. There was a small mistake they made with the Ranger Raptor when it was launched.
Yeah.
It couldn't do one thing that you'd expect a pickup truck to do. It wasn't type-proof. It wasn't type-proof for towing for the first batch of them, so you couldn't legally put a tow bar on any of the original Raptors. They changed it afterwards.
But it was also technically a passenger car because it didn't have a 1-ton payload, wasn't that right?
Yeah. It was like literally, it was not a truck.
Not that matters anymore anyway, because they've changed it so all double cab pickups, regardless of payload, are not a class as passenger cars. But yes.
Oh really? That's what
they're not. Again, it's a stupid grey area where they are registered as LCVs, but they're taxed as a company car rather than a company van.
Yeah.
But you'll pay. Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose just to summarise what we've been talking about, yes, there's massive challenges. Yes, it's complicated, but making sure that if you are going to electric for your vans, make sure you do the prior planning and make sure that you find a vehicle that is going to be fit for purpose. Don't just buy the cheapest electric van you can, then think about charging later.
And don't overspec it either. I mean, it's just as important to not go out and buy the one with the longest possible range. You might find you actually don't need all of it. So understanding how your vehicles move, where they've got opportunities to charge and so on, might end up saving you money as well. You don't need to lug the largest possible battery around necessarily. You might find the smaller standard range version is fine. But it's just important to understand it, isn't it?
And charging speed's the important thing. Like there's certain things, like if you look at the Renault Kangoo, there's the Nissan version, the new one. They can all charge at 3-phase 22 kilowatts, and they haven't got a massive battery. So actually, you can think that you can top them back up 50% in an hour. So that could be a van that you might pick a van with a slower charger, say 11 kilowatt on board, and actually you could get away with a smaller battery and one that can just charge, because 3-phase depot charging is not
It's not that
uncommon.
expensive, yeah.
Yeah, and it's basically as cheap as a normal charger if you've got 3-phase.
Yeah. No, you mentioned that, Alex. Optimization is absolutely key. You know, don't necessarily over future-proof the van or your charging infrastructure.
Yes,
Make sure that you optimize it. So, and that's what Zero Dynamon's tool does. It optimizes it not only to save you money, but make sure it's right. But something that I'm especially excited about is there's a new van coming out soon called the Flexus, and that's got 240 kilowatt charging speed. And it has got a decent range, and that's going to be like a last mile delivery. So, you know, if a vehicle like that pulls up to a charging station and the charger is capable, whether that's at the depot or publicly, the downtime on that vehicle is going to be very, very low indeed, especially if it's charging at the lower end of the state of charge. The battery's warmed up. You know, that's going to be a really interesting van to hit the market very, very soon.
And let's not forget the Verizon coming out.
And it's already out, isn't it?
Yeah, and the PV5. So
yes,
there's a lot more variety coming to the van market as well. So, and from manufacturers that didn't even work in that space. You know, Kia, been renowned for the efficiency of their cars. If they bring that to their vans, it's a good sign.
Yeah, and they've got a people carrier version of it as well. So yeah, the PV5, Kia, the Verizon, and the Flexus. They're three new vans that are kind of pushing the barriers out the way.
And ground up electric vans, not just a conversion of an ICE van.
Exactly. They all look very similar, to be honest. So you put all three next to them. It's a bit like a lot of the electric SUVs out there, like the one that Kevin's driving at the moment that looks pretty much like a Model Y. Wait, is it again? It's
so I'm in an Xpeng, the Xpeng G6.
Okay, well, I'll tell you what. Why don't we just finish off with what we're doing this week and what car you're driving, Kevin? Because you're driving a new one every week.
So yeah, this week I'm testing the Xpeng G6. So far, I've been very impressed with it. I mean, it just doesn't seem to go flat. I've been driving using its semi-autonomous features, set at motorway speeds, and literally it's easily looking like it's going to do 400 miles range. I mean, it's high 300s anyway, but I mean, it just seems to just work. And around town, it seemed ludicrously efficient. It's like I'm just about probably going to take it for my eco run now while it's still warm. And I wouldn't be surprised if I was seeing the figures round about the 10 kilowatt hours per 100 miles. It's literally, it just seems, and it's on 20-inch wheels, so I don't know how they've managed to do it.
Well, we need to get someone to lend you a Model Y just to do a proper comparison, Kevin, just so you know.
And if you don't get a Far East movement pun into your LinkedIn profile, which is
every time I hear Xpeng G6, it sounds like that song. That song. Quick, take it off. Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking about.
I mean, the number plate's amusing on this one because it's XP03ENG, so it's Xpeng. So just in case you don't know what it is.
What are you doing for the rest of this week, Kev?
That's the main thing, is seeing how far I can get that.
Cool. Well, this week for me on Tuesday, I'm going to Electra, Yorkshire, I think it is. Brighouse to check out their vehicle because they've got an open day, and then on the Wednesday I've got Transport and Energy Forum, and there's some really good speakers talking about all the ins and outs of electrification there, and lots of other things going on, and of course Chargeheads YouTube video going out, which is going to be about the dechroming of Rusty and a few other bits. Alex, what have you been up to? Or what are you going to be up to?
Well, when I finished fighting off this cold, I'm going through a bit of tyre shopping for my new wheels.
New wheels?
For the Polo, not for the Rifter.
Oh,
but yeah.
Nice. Good stuff.
The Rifter.
There's some very, very cool Rifters on Instagram with like lift kits and bull bars and studded tyres on them. They look really, really cool. But
that's your website, Rifters of Instagram.
Riftstagram, yeah.
No, cool. Thanks everyone for chipping in today. Thanks everyone for listening. Please share if you think people people like to listen to the YouTube live. And don't forget, we're on Spotify as well, so that'll be on Spotify later on tonight. But thanks everyone for listening, and we'll see you next week for a very similar chat around HGVs. So I'll see you there.